Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna, this is Coffee, Books, and Bullet Journals, and I'm going to talk about the top 10 books that I read in 2018. In 2018, I read so many good books. In fact, I read 26 5-star books, which is fantastic. And I don't know if it's normal or not, because this is really the first year that I've been on BookTube and the first year that I've read so many books. But so out of the 102 books that I read in 2018, 26 of them were 5-star books, and even more were 4-star books. So I definitely had a really good reading year. And so narrowing my favorites list down to just 10 books was not at all daunting. Nah, not at all. I was a piece of cake. No, not at all. It was so difficult. And like things moved around. I kind of made my list and then I would change everything, and yeah, so I did not do any rereads are not going to be on this list, and then not like Harry Potter's not on this list. Not saying Harry Potter is not a great book, but like I wanted to be able to take this as an opportunity to like show you guys some other favorites. We all know Harry Potter is a classic and an amazing series. So I didn't want to put those on this list. I wanted to be a little bit different. I was actually kind of surprised by the way, once everything kind of settled and was where I wanted it to be, I was surprised at what was on this list. I have 2 nonfiction books. Like, who am I? So I have 2 nonfiction books. I have some YA. I have fantasy. I have 2 fantasy books on my top 10. Who am I? So you probably won't be surprised by some of these because I have talked in depth about them, but I definitely am, there's some surprises on there. So anyways, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start with number 10 and then work my way up to number 1. I'm hopefully going to be premiering this. So right now, if you are watching with me or if you're just watching it later, go ahead and comment down below what you think my number 1 favorite book is going to be. I don't think it'll be too much of a surprise, but we'll see. So, yeah, let's go ahead and start with number 10. Coming up at number 10 is going to be I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. Sorry, this is a library copy and I'm getting a really bad glare, so I'm not going to leave it up for very long. So this is one woman's obsessive search for the Golden State Killer, and I listened to this on audiobook, and I highly, highly recommend that if you're going to read this to listen to it on audio, because it kind of reads like a true crime podcast, which I absolutely love those. So this book starts is a woman's obsession, basically. I mean, that is what it is. But so this woman, she had this true crime blog called the True Crime Diary. Yes, where she just talked about true crime and some like different unsolved cases, and this one really grabbed her attention, and she started delving so deep into it and just doing so much research for it. And the Golden State Killer was very elusive and hadn't been captured and hadn't been found. Nobody knew who he was. So she did so much research, and Michelle McNamara actually passed away before this book was actually published. So a few of the chapters are written by her team. Her husband had some stuff to do with it. Her editors, just like basically pulling things from her notes, which is kind of, I don't know, like kind of sad that she didn't get to see the Golden State Killer come to justice, and like she had done so much work for it. So this book was so enthralling. Like I said, I listened to it on audio, and it was, I think I finished it in like 2 days. It was so engrossing. So there you go, number 10. Coming in at number 9 is another surprise, and that is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. When I finished this book, I was actually debating like rating it between a 4 and a 5. I wasn't one of those ones that like I absolutely loved, I couldn't put down. But as I finished it, as I kind of went over my thoughts, what I felt about it, I loved it more and more. And so that is why not only did it get a 5-star, but it ended up as one of my top 10 favorite books of the year. And this book does not have a huge plot. It is about two magicians that were destined to basically duel each other, and then there's this, they connect and they fall in love, and they're supposed to be mortal enemies, and so there's this huge like lifelong game, and it's all built around a circus that comes to life at night, hence the Night Circus. And so like I said, not a huge plot, but the characters are so beautiful. They are just, they're perfect, and the world building is so atmospheric. It takes place in like early 1900s steampunk England, and yeah, it was so beautiful. And as I read it and I was listening to part of it on audio, and it's so engrossing, and you just get sucked into that world. And this is a book that absolutely should be made into a movie. No doubt about that. So highly recommend this book. And like I said, I don't read fantasy. This is not a genre that like I absolutely love. And so for this to be in a top 10 from someone who doesn't read fantasy, that means that if fantasy is not a genre for you, you might still really enjoy this, especially if you love character-driven stories and world building, and maybe not so much plot, but very atmospheric. Coming in at number 8 is the only graphic novel on this list. However, that is surprising because when I started this year, I didn't think I liked graphic novels, and so that is Moonstruck Volume 1. I read this during Spookathon, and this is the cutest graphic novel I think I've ever read, and it is about two queer werewolves and the adventures that they get into. And Volume 2 comes out in February, I think. So I'm very excited about that. But like I said, the art style is just fabulous. It is gorgeous. The main werewolf is a barista. And so that was just like an added just level of cuteness that I couldn't handle. Highly recommend that you pick this up. It is on Hoopla for free if your library supports Hoopla. So definitely check that book out. Coming in at number 7 is not a surprise because it was on my top 5 books midway through the year, so definitely not a surprise that it is still on there, and that is The Witch Doesn't Burn in This One by Amanda Lovelace, a collection of poetry. And this one actually, I think I enjoyed more than The Princess Saves Herself in this one, but both of them are just fabulous pieces of work. And this one I think just resonated with me a little bit more because it talks about the women's movement, and it's very feminist. It's hard to explain this book. I think though the first one, where she's really just dealing with some personal things that have gone in her life, and the aftermath of trauma and abuse and all of these other things that have happened to her, and this one is like her just kind of coming out of the fire and being so much stronger and just being a badass. So this one just really resonated with me as someone who wants to be a badass. Coming in at number 6, again, not a very big surprise at all, especially as this book is very on brand for my channel, and that is The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang. This is a contemporary romance, and it deals with Stella, who is a statistician, but she does the math to try to figure out what people want to buy, using algorithms and things like that. A company like Amazon and stuff use people like that to try to, when you have those recommended for you. There's a mathematician behind all of that. And so that is what she does. Stella is also on the autism scale, and she has Asperger's, and so she's very good at her job, but she does not do very well in social situations. She just does not date very well, and her mom is kind of getting onto her about getting married and having a family, but she's just dreading that because she doesn't like having sex. All of the experience she's had from having sex in the past have just not been positive, so she's just kind of dreading it. So she does what any logical person would do, and hires a male escort to basically teach her the ways of having sex and dating and that whole thing, being a good girlfriend. So Stella meets Michael, who is the male escort, and he is half Vietnamese, I believe, so there's that diversity as well. And as it is a contemporary romance, they definitely fall in love, but there are so many little subplots in this book that she does so well. You get to see a lot of Michael's family and the troubles that he's going through. You get to see things with Stella and her ex. And I didn't even remember this happening until I heard somebody else talk about it, and there's this one scene where like she's kissed without consent, which is like a little not okay, but still just an amazing book, and I loved it so much. Helen Huang has a new book coming out next year, and while I don't keep up with 2019 releases, I'm terrible at that, but that is one that I am absolutely looking forward to and very excited about. Coming in at number 5 is another surprise, and this is why I don't do my best of books until January, because I finished this book on New Year's Eve, and as I was reading it, I knew this was going to be a favorite, and I absolutely love this book. Again, a fantasy. Who am I? And that is Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Nyan. Now, this is a book that has been on a lot of people's favorites. So first, we're just going to talk about how beautiful the cover is, because it glitters and shimmers and so beautiful. The naked cover, also very beautiful. That's just beautiful. So this book has definitely a lot of trigger warnings. The ever-present threat of rape and attempted rape is basically the theme of this book. So basically, this book, there are 3 cast of people. So there is the paper cast, which means that they are fully human, and that's the lowest cast of people. And then there is the steel cast, which basically means that you're half demon, half human, or some form of that. And then there is the moon cast, which means that you are fully demon, which that is the highest ranking of people, even though they're not people, they're demons. So you have the Demon King, and the Demon King every year chooses 8 girls to basically become his concubines and his whores. And every night for that year, he chooses one of them to do with what he wants to have sex, whatever. And so you have some people who are doing this as their family. They're not chosen, or they are chosen. They don't get to choose to do it. They're just chosen at random. A lot of the people are like, okay, well, I'm doing it for my family, it's an honor, which is messed up in itself. But then Lei, who is our main character, is just not okay with it. And this whole book is about finding herself. She falls in love with another one of the paper girls. So there's a female-female romance in here, and it is so beautiful. This book I read so quickly. And it was one of those days that during over Christmas break, I had a whole day to read, and I was just flipping through the pages so quickly, and I'd look up and it'd be 2 hours later, and I was 200 pages in, and I was like, oh, that means it was a good book. So that is why this one made the list, and I'm so happy I read this. Coming in at number 4, again, a non-fiction book, and that is Educated by Tara Westover. This book is about a woman who grew up in a fundamentalist Mormon cult up in Idaho, and this, she grew up on a mountain. Her father was completely afraid of the government. They lived off the grid, and so it was just kind of her story of her growing up in that world. So she never had any education, never had any schooling other than what she was able to teach herself, and she was able to make it to BYU, where in her freshman level BYU class, she didn't know what the Holocaust was, which is just baffling to me, because I grew up in a traditional schooling, I had that. And so I love books that are in that separate, you're living within the normal world, but just so different, which is just, it's fascinating to me. And so this book, I just dove into, and it was so good. So once she was able to go to BYU. She actually has a PhD now and was able to study at Oxford, and it's fascinating the way that she was able to overcome a lot of those trials and tribulations and the hardships that her family basically made her endure. Now there are definitely some triggers in there. I just realized that like my top books definitely have some serious undertones to them. So there is abuse and sexual assault triggers for this, but still fabulous book. All right, on to my top 3 books. Have you been surprised yet? Some of the ones down below are newer additions, so that might be surprising to you. So without further ado, let's go on to number 3. Number 3 is Bad Romance by Heather Demetrius. I read this back in the summer and loved this. For a YA book to be this high on my list of favorites is pretty impressive. As you probably know if you've been watching my channel for any length of time, I don't connect with YA quite as much as I do adult. I am almost 30, so it's reasonable for me to say that. But this book was so good. Again, deals with very, very serious topics. So this book is about Grace, who has a very controlling and abusive mother and stepfather, and she kind of finds this knight in shining armor, as it were, in her boyfriend at high school named, I had to look at it, his name is Gavin, and so things are not as it seems, and you kind of know that going into this because this book is written in second person, so it's basically her writing a letter to her past self, which I think was very, very unique and different. Some people don't like that way of writing, and there were definitely some negative reviews about that, but I really, really enjoyed it. So Gavin obviously is not as great as he seems, and ends up being this abusive boyfriend, and she can't get out of this abusive relationship. So she basically went from one abusive relationship to another. It's definitely serious, but it was so good. I cannot recommend this. Again, like serious trigger warnings for any type of abuse, and like there's not like an all-out like rape scene or anything like that in here, but there is some times where she was questioning whether it was rape because like he would want to have sex and she didn't, so there's definitely like that level of consent, but not like there's not a, if I remember correctly, now I read this in July, but if I remember correctly, there is not like an outright rape scene in here, but there's still like a lot of that like mental head games going on. So again, serious trigger warning, but I'd highly recommend this book. Obviously it was number 3. All right, so number 1 and 2 were literally a coin flip. They could have been either one, and I know I have talked about both of these books so many times in the past year, so this is probably no surprise to you, but like I said, probably could have been a coin flip. So for number 2, I am going with Until the Last Star Fades by Jacqueline Middleton. This book I received from the author. It is a signed copy, I believe. Yes, it is. And this book tore at my heartstrings so much. Jacqueline Middleton is great at writing books where I actually start crying. And I don't do that a lot. Like, I will tear up in book, like when I'm reading, but I don't ever like physically like start bawling my eyes out in a public place until I read this book. And yeah, this book follows Riley during her senior year at NYU, and she has a boyfriend back home who proposes. He's not like that great of a guy, so it's kind of more like a marriage of convenience. He has money, her mother has cancer, and so there's a lot of medical bills and all of these other things that are, you know, kind of in place when that happens, and so she struggles with that. And then there is Ben, who is British and on vacation in New York, and they meet on a bus or train or something, subway, something, and they become very, very good friends. And as it is a contemporary romance, this, you know, they fall in love, as one does. But like with Helen Huang's book, Jacqueline Middleton does an amazing job at also doing all of these subplots. So there's a very, very strong mother-daughter relationship with Riley and her mom, which I absolutely loved. And you know, Ben has his problems and his history. There is a full ensemble of cast that is just, they're lovely, and I want to be in their world. But anyways, I have gone on so much about this book, so I'm not going to drown you guys out anymore, but yeah, cannot recommend this book enough. Alright, and that means that the #1 book of 2018 goes to none other than The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I have been binge watching best videos of 2018, and this book shows up on so many people's, even if they're not contemporary readers. So this kind of bounces back and forth between being a contemporary and a historical fiction, and it really reads like a memoir. So Evelyn Hugo is basically the Elizabeth Taylor of this fictional world, although you don't think it's fictional, because I've definitely, when I was reading this, tried to Google Evelyn Hugo to see like which movie she had been in, and then realized she's not a real person, she's a character. So there's that. But this book is so beautifully written. So Evelyn Hugo is nearing the end of her, she's retired, she's kind of selling a lot of her memorabilia from over the years that she's collected from doing her movies, and she has chosen this young woman named Monique, who is basically a nobody in the journalistic world. So everyone is very surprised that she was chosen to do this. And Evelyn Hugo has asked her to write her biography, and basically asking, so Evelyn Hugo obviously has had 7 husbands, and so it's this whole story of how those marriages began and ended, and who her true love was. This is not a spoiler to say that Evelyn Hugo is bisexual, so there is a relationship with a woman in there, and this is the book that every other book should aspire to be when talking about bisexual representation. This book warmed my bisexual heart. I absolutely loved this. The writing style, the plot. There were plot twists in this book that I didn't even see coming. Now, I don't read a lot of thrillers, and this isn't a thriller, but I don't read a lot of thrillers, so I don't necessarily pick up on all of the plot twists, but this one like came at the end, and I was very surprised, and yeah, I can't say enough good things about this book, and I know that everyone has probably already read this by now, but if you haven't, please, please, please do yourself a favor and pick this book up. Again, there are some trigger warnings for abuse. Her first husband was abusive to both her and multiple other women after her, so there definitely is that trigger warning for that, but this book is so good. Alright guys, that is my top 10 books of 2018. Were any of your favorites on this list? Comment down below and tell me what your favorite book of 2018 was, and I will talk to you down in the comments. If you are new here and you have not yet subscribed, there's a little red button that you can do so down below, and until next time, I will see you all later. Bye. Did anybody else, when they were doing their best of books, have a really hard time actually formulating words to talk about your favorite books? Because I feel like when I hate a book, I can't stop talking about it, and it's one of those things like I could probably write an entire essay on, but when it's a book that I absolutely love, it's more like, oh, I love this book.